In the dwarvish traditions of the Third Age, the names of the places where each of the 7 ancestors had awakened were remembered. That of the ancestor of the Longbeards, Durin's folk, had been Mount Gundabad, in origin a Khuzdul name, which was therefore revered by the dwarves, and its occupation in the Third Age by the Orcs of Sauron was one of the chief reasons for their great hatred of the Orcs. Though these places of awakening were far sundered, the dwarves of different kindreds were in communication, and in the early ages often held assemblies of delegates at Mount Gundabad. My Gavanen Melonin, and well met indeed. I'm Arachir Galadirthan, head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome back to Divide and Conquer as we bring you another faction overview, and this time for Gundabad in version 4.5. Before we get into this properly, please do note that a hotfix has been released in not really an official per se capacity on the Discord under the DAC install thread. The hotfix will fix your Northern Dunedain beacon system. It'll fix random AI crashes when they are sieging settlements, which is quite unfortunately common, but not anymore. And it also fixes the high elves spawning in the ocean with no bodyguards. So please do download that. You'll have to start new campaigns to use it. The instructions are on Discord, so I just wanted to get that out there. Right, so today we're dealing with Gundabad from Mount Gundabad. Now, the premise behind Gundabad as a faction, and I think this is the best time to mention it, is that you have come from the frozen lands to the north. This is entirely a fan fiction faction, and the reason is because the alternative is to basically have a clone of Moria. There's almost no way to have Gundabad have some sort of fun aspect to them without them just being a clone of Moria, and that's what we don't want. It's the whole reason we changed Angmar as well. But anyway, Gundabad, you're these snow orcs. You've come from the far frozen north, where you have been since the fall of Beleriand. You are an orc nation who still are beholden utterly to Melkor. Now, many of you will cry, how is that possible? Surely Sauron's will is keeping all the orcs going. But we would ask you to smudge some of the less well-known aspects of the lore. It's not set in stone that Sauron's will gives life to all the orcs and the creatures of Melkor, and it is indeed very much assumed, to my understanding and reading, that Melkor's will still sort of powers all these evil beings, and Sauron is just strong enough to command them. So the orcs of Gundabad have come from the north, where you've been hiding since the end of the First Age. You're here, you support Melkor. Now, all orcs, of course, support Melkor, but you don't directly answer to Sauron. He is not your direct lord, and that is a feature throughout their campaign. Also, the Snow Orcs are a faction based entirely on almost raw brute strength. So your nation and your units are very powerful at each tier. You're not a particularly heavily armoured faction, though. Armour is something you don't do very well, but your troops in general are just really powerful. But they are a little rare. So that's an overview of Gundabad. I haven't done that on any of the other videos, but Gundabad I felt needed it because they're a fan fiction. They are a fan fiction faction. It's a bit of a tongue twister. So the starting size. At the start of the game, for you, the player, you've only got Mount Gundabad here in the north. Your army is 4 units within the city. You've got a general in a fort over there called Hazolg, who's obviously just shamelessly Azog. And over on the west-hand side, you've got Marauder Chief Gerzog, but he doesn't have any forces with him. So you've got a very small starting army, and only 1 town, which doesn't have the most pre-built buildings you've ever seen in your life. It's got a couple of unique buildings, which is nice, though. But there is a camp guard, so you can at least get some units relatively straight away, including a set of Bogs Champions, who are a good unit we'll see in a moment. Custom generals then, if we go through, King Mazog, your faction leader. Oh, that's the other thing. You're called a king. You have a king and a marauder chief. You're not chieftains or tribes. You're a king. And it's all described, and particularly the pop-up message that comes up at the beginning. I'd recommend reading that. I've not read it out for this one, but do read through that. But anyway, King Mazog has Pale Oryx as his bodyguard. They're your elite late-game units whose armour is inspired by the Hobbit films. Marauder Chief Gerzog from the fort over there comes with Orc Avengers, who are one of the best strike infantry again, or certainly the Orcs' best strike infantry. Well, they are. There's no Orc strike infantry better than Orc Avengers, but whether or not they're in the top 10 of all strike infantry remains to be seen. But in the east, you have Hazolg, who is a ranged general, and he comes with Black Shield Archers, your best archer unit. Also note, Gundabad basically buck the trend of all the other Orc factions in that they're not a trash and horde nation. They are few and elite, so they do step somewhat on the toes of Isengard, but where Isengard are armoured and heavily defensive, Gundabad are incredibly aggressive and just very elite. There is a family tree for Gundabad as well, which is completely unique, of course. I didn't realise that had a little... Oh, it's because he's the faction leader, of course, idiot. So there's a family tree, so you get to see portraits of actual other orcs, which we've taken from I don't know where. I think it was in the mod before and we just turned them back on again. So you're not a Teutonic family, because of course you have a king. But all of your children will look like the little goblin freak there, Bolsmug, and daughters and those that have come of age share the same portrait. So there's no difference between daughter and older orc, because it's damned hard finding a picture of an orc that isn't anime. And unfortunately we don't have the skills to draw one from scratch. So you've got a family tree, which is very unique for Gundabad. The area that you start in, of course, is you're in an excellent position at the start. You've got Angmar blocking you in on the west-hand side, but note you're not allied to them, but they are over there. And there's only two ways into your realm from the west, the north of the mountains or through the gap at Litash. Coming up from the south, you've got the Anduin Vale, but of course they've got to come up from the south, which gives you plenty of hill battle maps in this little gap here, which is called Scather's Gap. And finally, from the east, should the dwarves come on the northern side of the Ered Mithrin, then you've got them bottlenecked there as well, near Captain Thrukuul, who should be hidden, but for some reason is not. The mountains, of course, give you some natural protection, which many nations don't have, but you, fortunately, do. There are also a couple of custom battle maps around here, in fact almost all of them are. Mount Gundabad is a custom battle map and looks almost exactly like it does on the campaign map. So it's a simple wall that you can put troops on, there's a couple of towers and a gate, and then the square is just in front of the large sort of castle-y keep thing. Berserkle is also a custom settlement and looks exactly as it does there. You first defend this wall here, and then there's a little bridge protecting you where the keep is then stationed on an island in the lake, and the square is up there behind a second wall. So it's a very easily defensible map, which is almost wasted really, because you will almost never be attacked there. It is the most northerly province Well, the most northerly province really is Rakhang, but it is the most northerly settlement in the entire map, if you don't count the settlement that none of you are allowed to take, which is Forodwaith. And so it's rarely ever attacked, but it's a very cool battle map, so it's got that going for it. Of course, Litash is also a battle map, and again, it looks like that. Mount Graham has a custom battle map, so there's a couple. Danes Halls is custom. So the campaign has quite a lot of variety at the start. You will be fighting in quite a lot of custom battle maps at the beginning, which is nice. It adds variety. The rebel nations around you, you've got Berserkle to the north, Danes Halls, Yolstone, and that is it. Other than that, you've got to possibly try and get down to Goblin Town, which is not held by Moria when you play as Gundabad. So for everyone else, Moria reclaims Goblin Town at the start, but for you, it doesn't start as held by Moria. So it's you and them sort of running for it. Remember, Moria are very much Moria. Goblin Town is only given to them for other factions to make Moria a little stronger, otherwise they need the boost that Goblin Town gives. But remember, the faction is called Moria now. They are not a Goblin faction based in Goblin Town, and thus Goblin Town is an independent Goblin town. And it is not owned by Moria. So as they are no longer the Misty Mountains faction, they are now the Moria faction, so that's why they don't start with it. And to be honest, I'd have them not start with it in every campaign, but unfortunately Moria are just too weak without it, and they succumb. They can get their hordes and trash out, but just not enough if they don't have the town. So it's there for you to take. In terms of diplomacy, as you've already seen, as I say, you've come back to Middle-earth. You don't have allegiance to anyone. You are more inclined to ally with the evil nations because of the way that the faction standings work, and particularly those that share your religion, which in-game is of course called culture. And you are Melkor's shadow. So you share that with all of the others. So you're more inclined to the evil nations, but you don't start allied to anyone. And you are at war with the dwarves of Ered Luin and Erebor, who are your sworn enemies, dating back to a grudge founded at the Battle of the Nerneothar Noediad in the First Age, and then on. So the dwarves are your hated and most loathed enemies, so you're always at war with them. At least you should be. And particularly as we move through, there's various features about attacking the dwarves that we will see. So turning to economy, you are an orc faction, so like all of the others, you don't get the third tier of castles, so you don't get strongholds. So that's a bit of a restriction, but otherwise you do get everything on the town side. You get the fighter's pit that most orc factions get, and it is the only method, unless you take Goblin Town, as we'll see in a moment, it's the only method of getting trash units. You don't get trash. Your starting units are really quite good. They're about as good as Gondor Militia and above, and they cost about the same as that. So you're very much like an Orc Gondor faction, basically. There is no trash. So if you want to get that more readily available trash, the best bet is by getting that guild, which is very, very easy to attain. So don't worry. It is an easier one to get, and that at least gives you some cheap trash you can get out. Otherwise, you don't get a guild. That is the only one to you. You build Shrines of Melkor, but you don't get a unique third tier. You only get 2 tiers of that. And otherwise, there's not really much to say. You are a nation that does use the barracks and the practice range and the stables, so you will be able to utilise barracks, archery ranges, and stables of other factions. You don't have your own unique building line. You get town health, as everybody does now, and you get the garrison quarters as well, which gives you, of course, defensive troops when you're attacked. Do note, just to bring it to attention whenever I can, this is not a bug. It is simply because the building requires either the town version of the slave pit or the castle version of the slave pit. But the building itself can be built in either a town or a castle, so it lists both. I suppose one way around that is we could rename the castle line so that at least it says 2 different buildings. But then if it had 2 different buildings, you'd all think, well, hang on, I can't find the castle pit. So how am I ever going to be able to build it? But anyway, it's not a bug. It's just the game, a poor feature of the game. Well, it is a bug, but it's one we can't fix. Your diplomat comes out of Gundabad. Talking of diplomats and unique buildings, he comes from the Great Gates of Gundabad, which is available to you. You don't get ships because you're an orc faction. You can hire mercenary ships, of course, but you don't get to train any ships yourself. And you also do not get an advanced blacksmith. Now, there's a very good reason why you don't get an advanced blacksmith, and it is because you get something called the Avengers Guild. And the Avengers Guild is a very cool concept, I think. I would think that because I came up with it. Or did someone else, actually? It's been a long time since Gundabad was added. Anyway, sorry. If I didn't come up with it, I'm terribly sorry for saying that I did. And if I did come up with it, then my self-aggrandization is warranted and justified. But anyway, the Avengers Guild is built in dwarven cities only. It does exactly what the name suggests. You are avenging the wars with the dwarves and orcs. And if I can just read you this, it gives you a bit of background. Since the war of the dwarves and orcs, the orcs of Gundabad have harboured a deep hatred of the dwarves, more so than any other servant of the shadow. The most zealous of these orcs have now joined together to enact vengeance on the dwarves where they can and to avenge the fallen, hence the name. Upon claiming an ancient dwarven hold, these avengers turn the smithies of the dwarves to their needs and salvage as much armour and as many arms as they can. As such, an Avengers Guild is a welcome sight to any snow orc captain. So you can build it in dwarven cities, and they're just the big key dwarven cities. So places like Danes Halls, Erebor, Kirigthol, Moria, and then probably over in Ered Luin as well, Thorin's Halls for Hamgathol, those kinds of places. So you're not going to get it in Goblin Town, for example, which was never a dwarven city. Oh, I've turned something off. All the banners have gone. That's annoying. Ah, there we are. I pressed the wrong button on the mouse. Anyway, sorry, carrying on. So the Avengers Guild has 3 tiers. The first tier gives you the Orc Avengers. We've already mentioned them. They're a fantastic unit, and Gerzog starts with them as his bodyguard. So you get a taste of them for a while. Danes Halls is the first place where you will be able to build the building in question, the Avengers Guild. And then in the 3rd tier of the guild, you can get the armor upgrade boost that for everyone else comes from the advanced armorer. And for you, it's called Scavenged Dwarven Plate. Now, many of your units do get a visual upgrade when they get Scavenged Dwarven Plate to reflect the fact that they're now wearing Dwarven armor. And it also gives you a melee weapon bonus, as you can see. It may well in future versions be restricted to only 2 tiers because that experience bonus is actually relatively useless, and we've been trying to remove things like that. So it may drop down to only 2 tiers. But at the moment, it is a fantastic building for you, and it can only be built in dwarven cities. Let's turn the names on rather than the banners. I think it's Control... No, N does that one, sorry. So, those are the only barracks and buildings that are available to you. Note as well that there's a beast cage that you get that gives half trolls and snow trolls. That's only available in certain locations as well. So you can't get that straight away because it is restricted behind the barracks event. But you'll see those units in the second half of the battle. But the half trolls and the snow trolls are very much a Gundabad specific unit. Although the snow trolls can be trained by Angmar, they're far more readily available for you as Gundabad. As they say, the reason you can't see that building at the moment is because it's behind the barracks event, which is why it's not showing in the city. Otherwise, though, that is pretty much it in terms of buildings for Gundabad. And then that brings us on to any scripts and gameplay events. And yes, there is a script and a gameplay event for Gundabad, and that is the subjugation of your lesser kin. So with the Snow Orcs being essentially the strongest and mightiest physically of all the orcs in Middle-earth, they have the power and potential to essentially enslave, or rather coerce is a better word. You're not enslaving them, you're just getting them to fight for you. You can coerce other orcs away and to do your bidding. But you need to capture their homelands in order to do so. So the first place you're likely to get this is Goblin Town. Once you capture Goblin Town, you are then able to train about 5 units from the Moria roster. Now you can only train them in Goblin Town, but it gives you primarily Snugger units, and you get quite a lot of them. So it allows you to then fill up your low tier trash to get units that you want to do the dying from Moria itself, and you get those in Goblin Town. Further down, if you take either Moria East or West, you can also then get those Moria troops there as well, but obviously you've got to capture it to get them. And if for some reason you bypass Goblin Town and you arrive in Khazad-dûm first, you can train them from Khazad-dûm before capturing Goblin Town. They're standalone. You can also train a few Guldurian units from Dol Guldur if you take that, so you can head over there and take Dol Guldur and you'll get some units from there. Furthermore, if you head further down, you can take units from Isengard itself as well. I think... No, originally we had a requirement being that Saruman had died, but I don't think we bothered with that in the end. It's just if you capture Isengard, you can train some Isengard Orcs and Oryx as well. I don't think you get any Uruk High, you just get some of their lower tier Orc units. Their Uruk Raiders and those kind of lower units. Secondly, or penultimately, you also get some Mordor units as well. Now, once you capture the Black Gate, you are able to train a large amount of low-tier Mordor trash in all of Mordor. Once you then also capture Barad-dûr and Mordor have been defeated, then you also get the ability to train Mordor's 3 Uruk units, the Sauron's Will, Morgul Chosen, and the Great Beasts. Now that's a very late game aspect, but if you are playing to the late stages of the game, you're going for a paint the map or you're going for a Gundabad supremacy, then getting those elite units from Mordor is a nice sort of checkpoint on your road to total domination. The other thing that Gundabad can do, which isn't related to orcs, is train the men of Rhudaur, but it is only possible if you are at war with the Northern Dunedain and Angmar are dead. So it does encourage you to backstab Angmar, which is absolutely fine because you are one of the few truly neutral nations, really. You're in it for yourself. So attack whoever you want. But Angmar have to be dead and you have to be at war with the Northern Dunedain. And then the Rhudaur troops only come from the Rhudaur regions as well. So Morvatarth, Nogvaraglaw, Camath Bryn, and I think that's it. So Rhudaur is also available to you. And that is the gameplay of the Gundabad faction. There are no other scripts to them. Now, in terms of difficulty, Gundabad is definitely a 2. I wouldn't say it's the easiest campaign in the game, because it takes a little while to get Berzikul, and it takes a little while to get the towns all around you. But the forces of the Anduin are not very good, and you outclass them in the early stages very, very much. Now, the dwarves may well come for you en masse and with earnest, or in earnest rather. It's really annoying me that that mouse button is wrong. But they will also normally be focusing somewhat on Rune, and even if they do come for you, Anduin and the dwarves combined is not enough to cause a problem for you as Gundabad. Personally, I don't think. There's maybe cause to suggest the campaign is a 3 in terms of difficulty, but it depends very much on whether you're utilising everything at your potential, everything at your disposal. Are you sending a diplomat out to try and work things to your favour? Remember, you start a war with the dwarves, but not the Anduin. And they may well be very keen to make peace with you, which is a problem we've seen in the past, actually. So you could try and ally with the Anduin, and it would solve some of your problems. In fact, if you allied with the Anduin, or even just maintained peace with them, the campaign is a complete doddle. But it is one of the easier campaigns, so it shouldn't be too difficult, I wouldn't have thought. But now we shall jump over to the battle map and show you what the roster for Gundabad looks like. Welcome then to the battle map for Gundabad. And a quick overview shows you that you are not an jack of all trades faction. You are a faction with a big focus on infantry. You're also a faction with a relatively small roster, which is why the coercing system that's available to you gives you actually quite a lot of units, because they help round out your roster. So by expanding and capturing your nations around you, you then get other units to fill out your roster. And do note that even the first 2 units I've included here, Orc Fighters and Hunters, they are actually the unit that comes from the guild, and they're available to a lot of factions. They're not specific to you, but there was an opportunity to talk about them here, so I've put them in here. But they are actually available to all Orc factions. And note, of course, you get very little cavalry, with only really 1 early tier, which you use which is not going to do very well in the late game. But there's a large argument to suggest that trolls are cavalry, so I've put them over there as well, as I always do. But let's start at the beginning then. So the Orc Hunters, these units are much more readily available than you think, even though they come from the guild. You will likely start getting a guild in all of your settlements after you've claimed 1 or 2 regions. It's a very easy building to get. So the trash is something you will be able to get a lot of. But they are just that. They're absolute trash. They're better than Snagger. They're about twice as good, but they're still trash. Bear that in mind. So an attack of 6, which is actually not that bad, and a defense of 5. So in the early game against Anduin, for example, or Moria, if you go that way, they will outclass the early game units for those nations, give or take. But they're not going to win you any awards. They're not going to be the mainstay of your army. They're supported, so the Orc Fighters don't have a shield either, note. They have their double weapons. They wield a weapon in each hand, but they're supported by a javelin version as well, called the Orc Hunters. Sorry, there we are, the javelin version, and they are a worse version of the fighters, but they have a javelin. So they're going to throw some javelins at their enemy with 6 missile damage, but their melee is 3 compared to 6 of the other one, and their defense is 4 compared to 5. Both units have average morale and impetuous morale response, and they are slightly faster than their other Orc brethren, as you're seeing there, 2% faster. But the Orc Hunters are considerably worse. They're the ones that are there to do the dying, and if they can get a couple of kills with their javelins first, then brilliant. But otherwise, they'll do very little. Whereas the Orc Fighters might actually do all right, claim some kills before they go down. Supporting them, and what will be the mainstay, are the Snow Orc battalions. There are 3. Raiders, Spears, and Scouts. We'll start with the Raiders. So they're another dual-wielding unit. They have this sort of wolf aesthetic where they wear wolf skins over their heads to keep them nice and warm. And otherwise they just have the sort of basic chainmail that you see on most Orc factions. They do still look very Orc-like. It's difficult to make the Orcs look all that different when all of their armour is basically grey or brown and some variant of leather or chainmail. So it can be a little difficult. But they are the Snow Orc Raiders. Now they have an 8 attack and a 12 total defense. And remember, this is your first unit. Its recruitment cost is 650, which is quite cheap, really. So it's not going to be costing you an arm and a leg. And their charge bonus is 6, which is very nice for an early tier unit as well. And remember, you can train this unit straight away. So it's going to do a lot of the killing for you at the start of the game. They have good morale response, but they are slightly slower than other Orcs. Or than other infantry, sorry, at 98%. Which is faster than most Orcs, who run at a speed, I think, of 95 to 7. So they're a bit faster than other Orcs, but they're slower than most ground infantry. They don't like fighting in Barren. They don't like fighting in grasslands. But they like the winter and they like the forests. So both of those are available to them. Or give them a boost. Supporting them are the Spears, the more defensive-minded version, with the Raiders going on the offensive. The Spears have an attack of 5 and a charge of 6, so lower on both accounts, but a much higher defense of 15. And note, as I've already mentioned, the armor stat for these units is abysmal. The defense skill is where they are shining, which means they are really susceptible to ranged fire. They will die very easily if they are shot at. So try and keep them out of the enemy fire, which is why the Snow Orc Spears will do a little better, because at least they've got a shield to help bat away those crafty Anduin arrows. Good morale response, 98% again. Also, supporting them, as I say, are the Snow Orc Scouts, your first archer unit. And now remember, the Gundabad archers are much better than other Orc archers, but you only get 2 units. The Scouts start with a 4 missile attack, which is brilliant. Moria, for example, their starting archer has a 1 missile attack, so does Dol Guldur. Mordor's starting has a 2. Isengard's starting is, I think, 2 or 3. And your starting is 4. So you're much better archers than all the other orcs. There's just less options. Total defense is 10 when they finish with their bows. Note again, terribly low armor stat, most of it coming in defense skill. So they're very good in melee, and they're very good against armor-piercing nations. But they're terrible if they get shot at. Melee attack of 5, charge of 4. They're the worst melee of the 3 Snow Orc units. But of course they have a bow. And they have damned good bows, so get training them. Lastly, they're supported by the Warg Marauders that are riding the snow variant of the Warg, which is cool. Nice little bit of variety. I think we may have seen these already because they're shared with many other factions. But they're just very sort of standard and average Warg units. An 8 attack, which is not bad. A charge of 5 would be... which could be higher and would be nicer if it were. Of course it would, but there are other cavalry units at this tier that are better in terms of charging at the enemy. The defense of 11 isn't bad, but note again an even split between armor and defense skill, although armor is slightly higher for these. Their average morale, impetuous morale response, so they will deal well with shocks, but they might charge on their own. They're not very good at charging into the enemy, but they are good at running down any routing units or getting units that are on the brink of routing to finally break and run away. Now the barracks event for Gundabad, which of course in version 5 will be removed, but for these videos the barracks event comes down that gap just there. So you don't get very much at the start of the game. You've really got to try and press out and get Goblin Town onto the fold so that you can train those snagger. But then after the barracks event, your mainline units become the Black Shield battalions. Black Shield warriors, Warband and archers. We'll start with the warriors over here. They have a sword and shield, or rather an axe and shield, sorry. And their defense now jumps up to 20, but again the bulk of that is defense skill, although it is a little more equal between the two. Their attack is now 11 compared with the 8 of the Snow Orc Raiders, so a better attack, better charge, better defense, not a double cost though, so the cost is about relative to how much better they are in terms of the other stats. Very good morale response, and again slightly slower than other infantry units, so watch out for that. They're just dedicated and good line infantry. Note though that we are, however many units in we are, and we have not had a single armor piercing unit yet. Armor piercing is something you are not known for. Just like you're not known for wearing armor, you're also not known for breaking it down either. But then we come to the Black Shield Warband. Their attack is 8. So but remember that they're spears, so we're comparing them directly with the Snow Orcs. So a 3 better attack and a 1 better charge, but the defense is considerably better at 22. And again, the armor is doubled, but the majority of that is defense skill. They cost 1,000, which is relatively expensive for a unit at this tier, and they can do shield wall. They're the first unit that can shield wall for you. Note that the Snow Orc spears do the Schildtrum instead. Again, very good morale response, and 98% movement speed. Or rather, 2% slower than others. But your armor-piercing unit finally arrives, and it's a really damned good unit. Wielding the armor of the dead orcs that they've scavenged from come the Orc Avengers. And as you can see as you look through the battalion, some of them have dwarven shields on their backs. Many of them have dwarven armor on, particularly when they upgrade as well. And almost all of them are wearing a dwarven helmet. Also, I think when they upgrade, some of them actually wield dwarven weapons. Oh no, they already do. There we are. Some of them actually have dwarven weapons as well. So they're a true dwarf killing unit, and they are designed for that. They frighten enemies. They're effective against armor. They have a 13 total attack with a 10 charge and a defense of 21, which is almost all in armor. They're almost the antithesis to the rest of your force in that they have a very high armor stat, but a very low defense stat. But armor is the one that is used all the time. The only bad thing about having high armor means that armor-piercing units will do a lot of damage to you. So watch out for the enemy's armor piercing, but in terms of armor piercing units go, this one is fantastic and will serve you very well. But it's very rare. Your general starts with a unit, so you will get them straight away, or you'll get to play with them straight away. Otherwise, you need Dane's Halls is the nearest location. After that, you're going all the way over to Erebor, or you're going down to Khazad-dûm. So they're quite far away. They're quite rare. So do watch out for that. You're not going to have loads and loads of them. Their morale, though, is excellent. Their morale response is impetuous, but as I mentioned, their movement speed is actually 5% slower. So they are so far your slowest unit. And lastly, your final archer comes in at this tier, the Black Shield Archers, who are closing in on being as good as human ranger units, and certainly in terms of missile damage of 6. But do note that they don't have ranger stats. So their range is 200, which is 20 or 10 meters less than a human ranger. They have 32 missiles, and their accuracy, though, is high. The key distinction in your archers from the other archers of the orcs is your accuracy. Your first archer is average instead of low, and your second archer is high instead of average, which bucks the trend completely of orc archers. So you do have really good archers. Total defense of 15. Again, evenly split between armor and defense skills, so that's not too bad. Melee is 10, which is very nice. Quite a good unit once they've run out of their arrows. Then we jump up to the elite tier, and there are 3 units available to you here: Pale Oryx, Bogs Champions, and Half Trolls. We'll start with the Pale because they're available everywhere. Now, they have the armor that is inspired by the Hobbit films. And many of you will say, oh, hold on, Gallo, that looks almost exactly like Isengard's armor, but just slightly pale and a little bit adjusted. And I would say to you, that's because it is. If you go back and look at the promotional material for the Hobbit films, you will note that they did basically just copy the Isengard armor and slap it onto the Gundabad forces. I presume to save on cost and time, because they already had, of course, all of the Isengard armor drawn and outfitted, and probably some armor sets still around. So anyway, they look like that for a reason, and they do look like as they do in the film. They can do a shield wall. They're a sword and shield unit, though not a spear, but their attack is 14, which is really good for a sword and spear, sword and board unit. Sorry, charge bonus of 9, which is quite nice. But the best thing about them is their 24 total defense, and they actually do now start to have a nice even split. So it's only really in the lower tiers that your units have that really high defense skill with almost no armor. Their armor is the highest of the 3. Excellent morale, but not locked. Good morale response, and they are slightly faster at 98% speed rather than 95. Supporting them are Bogs Champions, a halberdier unit that is only available in Mount Gundabad. They have an 11 attack, they have a 7 charge, they are effective against armor, skilled against mounts, they are halberdiers, not pikes. So their attack is not tripled or anything, but an armor-piercing attack of 11 on a halberdier is brilliant, and they are absolute monsters at killing enemy cavalry. And a defense of 21 is very nice to see as well, and again, nice even split, but no shield, so do watch out for arrow fire at this later tier. And lastly, the Half Trolls. Half Trolls are inspired by Battle for Middle-earth, and they are a damned fine unit. They are skilled against mounts, effective against armor, they frighten nearby enemy infantry, but they can't hide, which is only a minor thought. But their melee attack is 15 and armor piercing. Their missile attack is 14 and armor piercing. Their charge bonus is 12 and their total defense is 25. Couple that with the fact that they have 3 hit points means that they survive for a very, very long time. They are also one of your few, I think only units in fact, that cannot be staggered outside of possibly the bodyguard. The spears that they throw are particularly heavy and they will knock down the targets that they hit. They're a really, really good javelin unit, and when they finish with their javelins, they are monsters in battle as well. But there are hardly any of them, so you've really got to apply them in places where you really need someone dead, and they will bring them down. But other than that, though, the low numbers means they can still be surrounded. And even though they have 3 hit points, so the enemy's got to kill them 3 times, which is how the hit points works, they can still go down. Note that they have a movement speed of 110. Their morale is unwavering, but again, not locked. They will run away if need be. They have a 100-meter range, which is the highest of any javelin troop in the game, bar possibly the Guardians of Ennard Wythe. 100 meters is unheard of for a javelin unit, and they have very high accuracy as well. But note they only get 3 javelins each still. They're a brilliant, brilliant unit. They're quite costly, and they come in at the late game, but they're a fantastic unit. They have absolutely everything you can want. They're good against mounts, they are armor piercing, they have more than 1 hit point, and they will slaughter anything because they have the relentless trait. And lastly, speaking of trolls, we come then to the big-bellied snow trolls, who I always think look really silly because their head is basically lower than their shoulders, and they're like hunchback trolls. But anyway, they are the snow trolls. The snow trolls are better than cave trolls, but worse than Olokai. That's where they fit in the pattern. They are just the same as all trolls. Their attack is very high, their charge is very high, their defense is very high, and they have 6 hit points. So they have to die 6 times or take an overwhelming amount of damage. A general guide, as I've always thought of, and I've never been told any different, is essentially the way that the game deals with the killing of a unit is basically on a dice roll. So it isn't, for example, this unit has a 36 total defense. Let's say it's fighting against the Black Shield Warriors. They're both standing in front of one another. This one does an 11 attack. You would then think, personally, my first thought would be 11 attack, it's got to be a 36 defense, so naturally it'll need to attack 4 times in order to kill the unit, because 4 times 11 is 44, which is higher than 36, job done. But it isn't like that. It's done on some sort of bizarre dice roll algorithm that I don't think anyone really actually has ever pinpointed to my knowledge in the 7 years I've been active in Medieval 2 modding. And so a unit with 1 attack has a chance to kill a unit with a 50 defense. It all just depends on the attack stats, which defense stats are in play, what's the difference between the two, and then I think there's a random chance involved as well. It is not a direct number increase. What is known and is set though is the hit points. So the dice roll will decide whether or not the unit dies, and then if it has more than 1 hit point, it is simply one of those lives is then knocked off. However, the only thing that bucks that trend is siege, because ballistae and catapults can insta-kill trolls, and I don't know if that's something intrinsic to the siege weapon itself, so whether the siege weapon damage calculation is not a dice roll, or if an attack is so much greater than a defense that it has the chance of taking more than 1 life. That I don't know. But the whole point of this large rant is that siege equipment is the absolute best way of dealing with trolls. After that, you want to hit them with cavalry charges, armor piercing, or arrows. If you just send in swordmen against them, the swordmen will get massacred. But they do eventually die, of course, as you're all aware. You've played with trolls before. They're skilled against cavalry, though, so watch out for that. They frighten enemy infantry, as you might expect. They have very good morale, and they are locked, so they won't run away. These ones are bloodthirsty savages. Their morale response is impetuous. Note, there is not yet an animation for trolls to have the relentless trait. So while we would like them to have the relentless trait, unfortunately we don't have the animation skills to create that. So we'd have to hope that it may be created in time, or ask the gentleman that made the other ones and see if he would like to make a troll one for us. Because otherwise they will not be relentless. So they can be surrounded, which is one way of killing them off. Note that they are very expensive, and particularly note, as ever, say it with me now, they are not cavalry. So they will not take bonus damage from pikes or spears or stakes. They are infantry. Very, very large infantry. Which also means they climb ladders and siege towers, and they can wield battering rams. So watch out for that. Lastly, then we come to your bodyguard, the Mountain Guard. Simple name, simple unit, two-handed sword-wielding warriors, which is quite common for bodyguard, actually. There's quite a lot of two-handed bodyguards. They get a bonus against cavalry, which is quite nice. Their attack is 15, their charge is 9, both very nice as well. But 26 total defense means they'll be keeping your little faction leader or general, or, well, it would be general because your faction leader's got a custom bodyguard. So they'll be keeping your general or your captain alive for a long old time. Excellent morale, but not locked, so you can run away, which I personally think is good for generals. Their morale response, though, is only good, so it's not impetuous, which means they do struggle. They might take a little bit more extra morale damage than other units might, but they won't charge without orders. They're also the only unit in your entire roster that is neither faster nor slower than the average, than the default speed. So they've got that going for them as well. And that is Gundabad's roster. Many of you will be looking at this and thinking, geez, they really do have a very small roster, don't they? Surely you need to do something about that. And I would just simply say that Gundabad get a lot of units under their sort of enslavement coercion system. And it is very much expected that you will utilise that to head out into the world and use other orcs to do the dying for you. So then we come to who will be next week. Now, many of you will probably already have guessed this, because there is only one nation in the game that has such a gold and red theme to their army. There's also some purple in there, so I'm sure many of you have already said what it is. And I want to get this faction out of the way because they've now drastically changed for version 5. And so this campaign, I need to do it now while it's fresh in my mind so I don't get all of their features wrong. And it is, of course, Dorwinian. And here they come running through. The gold armour of the Avari standing at the back there looking absolutely fantastic. Coming through to the purple of the Dorwinian forces. You'll note this battalion, some of them are cloaked heads, looking very nice with their golden armour. Regent Bogard getting some crossbow shots off on us already. The Byzantine aspect of the nation. And then there's Thornbladesmen upgraded under the Avari side where they get golden armour upgrades. Looking very nice as well. But we can't not look at the Paladins to end though, because they're such a good looking unit. The Paladins of the Vintner Court. And Dorwinian, of course, again, another entirely fan-fiction creation. Now, I'm just going to rant for a little moment. Some people keep bemoaning Divide and Conquer for the fact that we have quite a few factions that are totally against the law. So why do we bother trying to make the game law accurate when we've got this, that, or the other that's completely against the law? And the reason I would say what I would give to you as my reasoning is because Divide and Conquer was created many, many years ago by a team of people who are no longer here at all. And we have promised to carry on their vision. But with any change of leadership, and indeed team change, new ideas come through. And I am a leader who particularly is fond of law accuracy wherever I can get it. I appreciate the mod cannot be completely lore accurate. It is beyond us. That ship has sailed. But what we can do is try to maintain lore accuracy, or at least try and maintain changes in keeping with the lore wherever we make them. And that is why I still try to keep the mod as lore accurate as possible, or at least as in keeping with the lore as possible, despite the fact that it is inherently not lore accurate. So there we are. I wanted to say that publicly so you can all think about that, and that'll be the answer to any of your questions in the future as to why are we doing this, it's not lore accurate. Or rather, why aren't you doing this, it is lore accurate. But there we are. So Dorwinian next week, that's all for Gundabad. Thank you very much for watching. Do download the hotfix if you're playing as the Northern Dunedain, and remember you have to start again. Otherwise, until we speak again, dear friends, Nevairneden Perimad Melunin, and farewell.